John Wooden is quoted as saying, "A coach is someone who can give correction without causing resentment, and a unified team is built not on sameness, but on shared commitment." Let's talk about team unity and coaching on today's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. All right, welcome to the Playing with a Purpose podcast, where we explore topics related to the moral development of collegiate athletes and young people as it relates to character, responsibility, and purpose. I'm your host, Matt Barker, and today I'm excited to have host of the Beyond Coaching podcast, and I'll make sure I get his title right here, Vice President of Athletics and Strategic Expansion at Friends University, among a lot of other things that he does, Dr. Rob Ramseyer, with me on today's episode. Rob, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you reaching out.
Doing a little bit of research on you, and there's a lot of things that I didn't even know until I kind of got into it. Your dissertation topic, very interesting to me, kind of similar to a little bit of what I talked about in my dissertation as well. Those of the listeners that maybe aren't familiar with Rob's work, the Peculiar Institution, multi-site case study of athletic department cultures at small Christian institutions. And school I'm at is Freed-Hardeman. I would consider that a small Christian institution. So that's something that's definitely, something that I would be interested in reading a little bit. And I don't know about you, Rob, but with my dissertation, I don't know if anybody's read mine yet. They say you can stick a $5 bill in the middle of it, put it in the library, might still be there once you go back. But this is one that I would definitely be interested in reading. And anybody that's in the athletic field definitely would be an interesting study. Really great to have you on the program today. Excited about it. This is one I've been looking forward to. And if you could just give us a little background of information about you. We're going to get into the Beyond Coaching podcast here in just a little bit. Give me a little bit of background about your education, family, experience with coaching, athletic department work, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I do say, I think I'll one-up you. I'm very confident my mother read my dissertation, but other than that, I don't know if anybody else has jumped in there yet. But so yeah, I'm just finishing up my 7th school year at Friends University, where the long title, I'm the athletic director. I do some development work. And then I help co-lead strategic planning for the university. So that's the role now. But growing up, and when I was in college, I did my undergrad, got a history major from Mid-American Nazarene, and thought I wanted to coach forever. Worked on my master's while I got into college coaching at Mid-American Nazarene was my first job. Master's in sports studies at University of Kansas. And then became a head coach at age 26 at Heston College, which is a private 2-year Christian school just north of Wichita, Kansas. And spent 4 years as a head coach. And year 2, it might have been after year 1, I realized I was working really hard, but really didn't have the foggiest idea. I didn't know as much as I thought I did, which I think a lot of people have that experience. So 2 things happens. One, I come from a family of a lot of educators, so I went out and tried to find some classes to take on leadership. And then really got close with Dustin Gallion, who was our basketball coach at the time. And we'll get into it later, I think. But we ended up, all those conversations were kind of the start of the impactful coaching project that we do together. But after my 3rd year as a head coach at Heston, we had our second daughter. And I remember it's kind of a vague memory now, but I got a video over from my wife doing something for the first time, and I missed it because we were playing some road game or something, you know. And for the first, I had been so singularly focused on coaching. That was the first moment I'm like, am I doing this right? Am I being a good father, good coach, all those kind of things? And as happenstance would have it, a couple weeks later, our VP of Student Life at the time at Heston announced he's retiring. And they decided to split up the role he was doing between me and the AD. So I got into the administrative side, where I became Dean of Students and head baseball coach, and was also Title IX coordinator. And then the guy that became the VP of Student Life, powerful mentor of my life, Joel Kaufman, he was VP of Student Life and AD. He decided to leave the next year. Administration, just kind of dumb luck. And did that, where I was VP of Student Life and AD for 3 years. And then had the opportunity in 2018 to come back to Friends, which was special because Wichita's my hometown. And we had just had our 3rd kid, and it's been a really special deal. My wife is Charlie. She's from about an hour from here. And we both have family in Wichita. We have 4 kids now, from 11 to 3 is the youngest, and they're getting to see their grandparents all the time. Their cousins live down the street, and it's just been a pretty special time of life for us. Professionally, I think this comes from after the first year of head coaching, where I was developing my knowledge of the game, but I think I was adequate there, at least got buy-in. but the challenges didn't come from anything specifically like X's and O's related.
Mm.
It came down to relationships, conflict management, culture development, whatever you want to call those kind of things. And that's really been something I've been fascinated with ever since. That's what my part of what my dissertation focused on, and really been diving down that road. The more I study, the less I think I know, but more questions I think I know to ask, and it's just been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's been interesting. I've been listening to a few of the episodes. I think you've had the podcast, the Beyond Coaching podcast, for over a year now. I think a year, with the Impactful Coaching Project, I think is going on 2 years, a year and 7 months is what I think I looked up. Great podcast, a lot of great guests. You and Dustin do a great job with that. I can totally relate to what you're saying too. I used to be a sports information director, and you feel like you're pulled a lot of different directions, just like coaches feel a lot of times. You feel like maybe sometimes you're missing out on things at home because you want to dedicate as much time as you can to your job. And certain jobs are a little bit more demanding than others. Coaching is one of them. Sports information directors are busy all the time as well. So tell us a little bit about the background behind how this Impactful Coaching Project, how did that begin? Is that something that kind of developed over time throughout your different experiences? Tell us a little bit about how that came to be.
Yeah, I think it really. So Dustin Gallion's my partner in it, and one of the best coaches, recruiters I know. And he became a head basketball coach at Hesston College at age, I think, 24. And I was 26. And in some ways, we felt like the blind leading the blind and had a lot of expensive experience learning hard lessons and a ton of conversation back and forth, looking for resources. How do we do that well? So that had just been, we're close friends, but part of our relationship for over a decade. And then about whenever Impactful Coaching Project started, it started because we had a donor come to friends and wanted to fund something entrepreneurial and was going to put up a decent amount of money, and everybody submitted proposals. So we came up with it like in a week, and we didn't get the grant. We're like, hey, we did all this work. Let's go with
use
it,
it.
see what happens. So that's really how it started. It took the impetus of somebody saying, hey, we'd help fund this. They didn't fund it, but we just thought we'd go with it because that when we were planning and writing up the proposal, it was something we wish we would have had. And we were like, well, if we can put this together, and that's how the podcast came about. It was initially Dustin and I just having some conversations, and we broadened it out. And I had a lot of, I don't know if anxiety was the right word, but we recorded a lot of them before we ever put them out because I didn't want to come across as a know-it-all. I was worried how it'd be received. And then we decided, let's do it. And partially because I was learning so much from everybody we talked to, or I'd probably be doing it even if we never published it because I just got to reach out to smart people and ask them questions. And it's so that part of it has been great because I feel like have such a deeper understanding of culture and coaching and leadership just from learning from others. And it's been great.
Yeah. You're at Friends University now. You said you've been there the last 7 years, and you talked a little bit about your other experiences other places. What is it about Friends that makes it so special for you? You mentioned that you're closer to family. That might be part of it, but maybe what's the most rewarding part for you to working in the athletic department at Friends?
A couple things. Friends specifically, I believe deeply in our mission and how we do it. It's a unique place. Historically, Friends was founded as a Quaker school, founded by the Society of Friends, hence the name Friends. We have this unique lane in Christian higher education where kids don't have to be Christians to come. And we're trying to meet people where they're at and walk with them, provide a great education. And somewhere in there, we hope they at least consider who Jesus is and what that can mean for their lives. So like one of our big evaluative questions for athletic programs, and we ask our students this every year, has the coach cultivated an environment where you can explore or grow in your faith? And I think that captures our lane really well. So that piece really attracted me. And from there, a chance to come home was great. I knew different people from Friends just through the years where I grew up here. And then the chair of the board at the time was a member of our church. I knew his family, and there were just a lot of neat connections where I was like, this could really be a good fit. And it has been. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah. So let's get into the topic today. Kind of what I want to touch on a little bit today is team unity. And you have a little bit of experience, Mid-American Nazarene. You were a coach there, a baseball coach, and you've worked with a lot of different coaches throughout your time in the athletic administration part of your job. So I really thought you'd be a good person to speak on this because you have a lot of experience working with a lot of different people and seeing the strategies that they use. And there's actually I really enjoy these short podcasts. I think they're 6 minutes. And one of the ones that I came across that was very interesting was sticky program culture. This is one that I'm not sure who came up with this topic, but it really talking about the transfer portal and how you kind of have this sticky program culture where people want to come. You also kind of have to look at sometimes, why are they in the transfer portal? Do we want, we need to make sure they're a good fit for us as well. But a lot of this goes back to building this unity with people that might not, automatically go together. You have to kind of see what fits, buy into this team culture to get that unity. So what does team unity mean to you?
I think the term, so we're big believers in 3D Institute and the work they do, and their term for it's team cohesion, which is the same thing I think we're getting at here. And really, when we talk about sticky, it was a word Dustin and I started using. We have a unbelievable football coach here. Retention's been strong. They have that great team cohesion. And our coach said something to me the first year he was here, where when kids are thinking about transferring and all that kind of stuff, I think coaches go down a rabbit hole where they talk kids into staying, and that just doesn't work.
Right.
And his response was, "This place is awesome. Why would you leave?" And that was his token response. They don't ask you for staying. It's why would you even ever think about leaving?
Yeah.
And I think that tone really gets you thinking unity, where how great is this place and how do we do it? But when you break it down, a coach is a community builder. We're building communities of teams. Athletic directors are building communities of coaches and athletic departments. And I think you start on a foundation of behavior that's allowed or not allowed. And a mentor of mine once said, all communities are exclusive, which that raises eyebrows from people when you say it, because we want to be welcoming, absolutely. But there's certain rules you have to follow, certain behaviors you have to stay in any community. I don't care if it's a family, it's a team, it's a job, whatever it may be. And making sure those expectations are in place of how we treat each other and how we act together, I think is the foundation of team unity, because we have a shared understanding of how we're going to operate. And I think a lot of coaches get themselves in trouble where they make a lot of assumptions on what those behaviors are and that people understand them. So I think that's one piece. And then I think it's the other piece. We talk about this where we talk about 3 C's of coaching. I'm not really a tagline guy, but Dustin talked me into it. But of the 3 C's for impactful coaching, we say you have to be competent, know what you're talking about. You have to be caring. And then you have to be constant, meaning constant character or constant presence. And the caring piece is what I find is the other piece of team cohesion. And what that means is you have an environment where kids feel cared for, and not in a soft way. Let's pat everybody on the back, which I'm a believer in patting on the back, but it's more you have systems in place where kids feel seen, known, and recognized. So on a smaller roster, one thing I believe in is have each kid share their story to the team. Who are you? Take 3 minutes, and share who you are. It's hard to dislike somebody once you know their story more, In a larger teams, that can be a challenge, but one thing, it's a 3D coaching thing. It's not original to ICP or friends, but we're big believers in doing the concept called put-ups, where after every weight session in the weight room, our strength coach does put-ups or gratitudes. And a put-up is you say somebody's name and you affirm something they did that's beyond the skill of the sport. Not just, hey, man, you scored 21 the other night. Great job. It's, hey, I saw your preparation, or I saw how you're a great teammate.
Yeah.
And then other people jump in and say a few things. And you want to talk about, we actually do it at athletic department meetings too. And all these coaches roll their eyes until they're the one that gets to put up and then they cry.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably my initial response to your question. I don't think there's this is how you do it. I think unity or even consistency in mission doesn't equal sameness. It's being yourself within a structure and going from there.
Yeah, and it kind of leads me into the next question too, because a lot of what you think about this is especially true with the transfer portal. You have a lot of different backgrounds, and you might have a mission at your school, but you have a lot of different cultural things going on, people that are coming into your program. You obviously want to make sure that's the right fit for both parties, but sometimes you do have individuals that might not be as familiar with your culture at your particular institution or your particular team. So you do have a lot of these different backgrounds. One of the words that Rob Miller, and I think you've talked with him, as well as Bruce Brown, uses a lot is the word trust. You have to trust the individuals, whether that's a coach or your boss or whatever it is, you have to trust that they have your best interest in mind. I think that goes back to a little bit of the unity aspect that you were mentioning, but how do you, maybe from your experience, how do you build that trust among team members, especially if you're in an environment where you have a lot of different backgrounds coming together as one? How do you kind of build that cohesion, that trust, where it might not initially be there, but how maybe do you work towards that?
I'd answer that 2 ways. One, I think coaches get themselves in trouble sometimes because they talk too much and say things they don't mean.
Mm,
So I think coaches need to mean what they say. And if they don't, because I think of a coach I had, let's say, who after a game, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and we're going to run you into the ground on Monday, all these kind of things, which looking back, I did as a coach.
yeah.
And then Monday comes and there's no change, So if you don't mean what you say, I think there's a lack of trust. And on the flip side, and I believe in this just as strongly, coaches are going to screw up. I'm going to screw up as a leader. And when it happens, go and apologize. It's
Yeah.
it's very simple,
Own
and
up
I
to it. Yeah.
and I think especially young coaches are fearful. Will that make me look weak? And it's no. I think it actually makes you look more powerful. And we can talk all we want about the broad backgrounds of everybody and all that different stuff, but I think there are just some common hidden needs of being seen, being known that we can accomplish for team unity. And then we take on those issues when you come. So take a football team, you're gonna have 100 kids out there. There is going to be conflict. That's just part of the deal. And a willingness to take on those conversations, not ignore them, build understanding, build trust goes such a far long ways. Because I think kids often are used to coaches that may say a lot but not mean it,
Hmm.
and then have a lot of authority figures in their life that may run from the conflict and the conversation instead of staying down and say, let's take care of this.
Yeah, I had a conversation with our head men's basketball coach, Drew Stutz, and he's had a lot of success the past couple years. And one of the things he talked about as far as getting a lot of these guys from different backgrounds is he used the word honesty. He said, I try to be as honest as I can. If they're not going to play their first year, I might tell them, this is something you're going to have to work towards. There's this many guys that are kind of in the same position. But one thing he talked about was being honest with the players and not just saying, yeah, you're going to start right away. And then they get there and then they're like, well, you lied to me. I don't trust that you're going to tell me the truth in the future. So it kind of goes back to that honesty factor too. They have to be able to trust you as a coach and what you're telling them is true. You alluded to this earlier when you were talking about whether this is in an athletic department or teams, these put up things that you do where you encourage people. And a lot of that involves communication, like vocally expressing that, right? Sometimes you can think things about people, but if you don't tell them, they're never going to know how you feel about them. So I think communication is an important part of that as well. I'm a communication professor. I talk a lot about this every day, so I obviously think it's important. Hopefully coaches do as well. But what role do you think communication plays in creating this team unity? Go back to some of the stuff you've already talked about, but
I think you're right on, and well, your background's a good example, quite frankly. Of now, I don't have a teaching background, but we have such a gap in the college coaching world where you play the sport, you can jump in, and if you can recruit, you'll probably run through the ranks a little bit. But the ceiling I see is you don't get taught like you would if you're going to teach at the high school level how to manage a classroom, which is the same thing as managing a practice
yeah,
in terms of communication, in my opinion. You don't get taught just pedagogy on how to teach. And some of the coaches that I've seen not do well, it's that stuff. They're wonderful people, they know their sport, but they don't communicate clearly. And I think it's a backbone of all. Then I'm going to go on a rabbit trail a little bit because when you're talking honesty, and I agree with what your coach said there. And I think when we kind of look at some of the leadership theory below all this stuff, I've been attracted. It was actually the first paper I wrote in a doctorate class. I found this research that talked about comparing transactional leadership with transformational leadership.
mm-hmm.
And we all love transformational leadership.
Right.
It's idealistic. We're changing kids' lives. I'm all for that. But there's a lot of stuff out there that says that's great, but if you don't build trust first, then it doesn't matter. It actually rings hollow. And how do you build trust? It's actually through the transactional side, which oversimplified is as a leader, as a coach, I say I'm going to do this, I do it. You say you're going to do that, you do it. So I say practice at this time, you continually show up at the right time with a good attitude.
Yeah.
That builds trust and allows us to build into each other's lives and build that powerful relationship that I think so many people want out of sport, and why a lot of coaches go into it is because a coach had such a great impact on their lives. But it's a process to almost earn the right to be heard, to steal a young lifeline. But yeah.
This other thing I thought about with any team setting, any work environment that you're in, there's going to be conflict in every situation at some point. When you're winning, maybe you don't see it as often. When you lose, you see conflict a lot more as far as maybe disunity within a team. I have two teenage kids. I see this every day. It's, with them at school. They have, maybe different cliques at school. And I think the same thing can happen with teams if we're not careful as well. We can have different groups within a team setting where they just naturally relate better to certain people on the team, and they maybe form certain cliques. And as a coach, maybe that's a difficult thing because you want people to relate to other people, but you also don't want it to be where they're going away from maybe what the team mission is, the team culture is. You want them to have that unity so everyone is on the same page as well. So from your experience as a coach and maybe working with a lot of coaches at Friends, how do you handle internal conflict and cliques within a team to try to keep that team unity? That's probably a tough question.
No, I think it's an interesting one. I have some outside the box thoughts on this actually from my time as VP of Student Life. So in that role, you're really charged with trying to create community for the whole campus outside the classroom. And when I was at Heston, I'm probably screwing up this number, but I want to say about 30% of our students were international students, and a big chunk of those came from Japan. Okay. And people would get really critical, not of the Japanese students, the other students, because the Japanese students would sit together at lunch. And they're like, how do we fix that? And my initial response is, I don't think that needs to be fixed. If I came to a foreign country, I would love eating lunch with somebody that spoke my language.
Right.
So I tell that story to, in any group, there is going to be cliques. It's how do we build understanding between them, build relationships between them so it doesn't become toxic. And naturally, when people are spending time apart, I think and especially in a group of competitive people, I think that could be a challenge. So the things I see that have worked is, number one, you name it. And I think you can start that from the outset. And especially when you see those things developing, and it's especially in a negative way, I think you have the conversation. I see it no differently than when we get complaints in athletic director chairs about coaches. I don't know how many complaints I've gotten where coach was screaming at this kid and not actually true. There's always some middle ground.
Yeah.
And my approach with coaches is, hey, I'm not saying this is even right, but here's what was brought to me. What do you think? And I think it's the same approach. And I don't even bring every complaint to coaches. There's some feel there, but I think same thing with the clicks piece is talking to a few kids from them, just saying, hey guys, here's what I see. I'm not telling you not to hang out with who you like, but this is going to impact our performance because of what's going on. How do we work together on it?
Yeah.
And the more it's we together, all those kind of things, I think it matters. And I think the other easy part is you're in control of who goes where in practice or at dinner or in the buses and all those kind of things. And the more you mix them up and the more kids can share their story with one another and get to know each other, the harder it is to dislike somebody else.
Absolutely. And this question might go back to some of the experiences you've had with your podcast, talking to a lot of different coaches on the way they maybe have handled some of these situations. But how can they tailor their coaching style to fit different individuals on the team? We talked about how every team's going to have people from different backgrounds, cultural things going on as well, that makes them unique in their own way, but it also makes it sometimes a challenge to reach every student athlete in the same way. So maybe the next couple questions might kind of go together here, but how do you tailor a coaching style to fit different individuals? And maybe that involves a little bit sometimes difficult personalities, because with this differences in who people are, there's going to come different personalities as well, different ways that they express themselves that might not be in line with how the cultural values of that team. And how do you kind of manage that as far as letting them be their own individual, but also having that team unity in the same process?
Yeah, great question. I think that's a hard one. I think at the college level, it's a little more clear to me because you do the recruiting of your team. You will always have difficult people, but you can create clarity of expectation on the front end of this is who we are. And I think that does help self-select out some people if you do it well. But I think a mistake college coaches make is when they have a tough, difficult year, either on the court or just team culture-wise, they think they can fix it by recruiting. And they can't. There's always going to be difficult people. So I think when you work with them, I think it comes back to, I don't want to sound repetitive, but creating clarity of expectation and having the conversation when you see it. And I actually wrote about this in a recent Substack article of ours. I'll share the story real quick. I was coaching in the Alaska Summer College Baseball League, and I think it was 2009 maybe. And I was 24, 25 years old, coaching a lot of big time guys and didn't handle it real well. And was probably doing some overcoaching. And our GM at the time came up to me, told me a story. There's some guy he'd coached with in the past, where big time summer league, and this hitting coach would always walk up to the most kind of the kid coming in with the best reputation of being a stud and all American, that kind of guy. He'd walk up, kid would be taking batting practice the first day, and he'd go, this is our All American. And they go, huh, that's weird, and walk off.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure he was trying to be a little bit of a jerk, but he was also trying to create an environment where kids wanted to be coached.
Yeah.
Because you can't coach a kid, you can't make them change if they're not willing to. So it goes back to this book I'm reading right now called the Let Them Theory, which essentially it's you can't talk people into heart change. So you need to let them make their mistakes and be there for them. And I think that's the balance in this conversation. But how do you cultivate an environment where it's clarity of expectation and space without hurting the team where kids can buy in? And eventually, the kids that don't are isolated on a really on an island on their own in an ideal world to where they either adapt or they get out. But eventually, and I wasn't good on this early in my career, but I think I'm getting better. There's going to be a time where you have to make a hard decision, even if you love kids, want to impact every one of them, where you have to cut a kid loose for the good of the team.
Right.
But hopefully that doesn't come until you've had those hard conflict conversations. You've been really clear on expectations and that student still hasn't adapted. And then you're to a point where you say, I gotta let loose one to really impact the other 29 or however many are on the team.
Yeah. And it's like you said, a lot of this goes back to leadership as well. Clarity of expectations, that's the number one priority probably in recruiting. This is something that the coaches are having to tell the recruits early on in the process. This is what we expect from you. These are some things that we need you to do when you get here. This is something that's expected from you at our school, right? These are things you cannot do if you want to be a part of this program. And I think, like you mentioned, this is something that's communicated early on. I think another part in addition to that, which kind of goes along with my next question, is leadership within a team as well. You have your coaches, but you also have these team leaders as well. Some people call that peer leadership. It's individuals on the team that kind of step up and take on leadership role from a player's perspective. Maybe sometimes we call that team captains. Sometimes we just call that just leaders on the team. Sometimes these are older individuals. Sometimes people emerge as leaders early on, right? We see that they have these qualities that they're really able to motivate their teammates. So how do you encourage or incorporate peer leadership within this to help build that team unity and utilize them and maybe helping build team unity as well?
Yeah, I think foundationally the first thing is shared language. If you can, especially your upperclassmen are talking like you in terms of terminology, and even like however you define unity, team cohesion, team unity, whatever it may be, that common language allows for coaches to work through kids. The other thing I've seen, I think coaches put too much pressure on college kids to do this. And it's coming from a good place, but it almost absolves them from leadership. And they all go back to I think it's the Bill Belichick quote of a team-led team's the best, whatever, the best option. Totally agreed. But we're working with 18 to 22-year-olds, not a 28-year-old
Right.
adult. So I see number one is common language, really getting the kids that have been in the program on the same page. That could be a lot of ways. I'm a big fan of the small groups where you meet as a small group, talk through these things, answer questions, and it really create clarity. The other thing I like that I think is probably an atypical response to this question is peer modeling and peer leadership and doing it in practice. So
Yeah.
assigning kids to teach roles, and this is a 3D coaching thing,
Yeah.
teach certain skills, teach different things in practice, where you take 10 minutes, you have the returners who have been with you 2, 3, 4 years, know how to teach a certain skill, and the coaches get out of the way and let them do it. And I think that allows leaders to emerge. And I'd even be a fan of a coach not showing up to practice and having a kid or two lead it, or maybe as part of the session or whatever it may be. And I think that allows leaders to emerge as well. Last thought on that, and it comes back to the communication and clarity we keep talking about. But when these things happen, here's how we take them on. So the kids have a framework to have that conversation. I even do it from an athletic director level where a former boss of mine recommended it, where I have a yours, mine, and ours list of here's my job, here's your job, here's the things we do together. We've never even talked about that for ICP or like friends within a team, but I think that kind of clarity, and it doesn't have to be a long list, also allows leaders to emerge. 'Cause sometimes I don't think kids know what space they have to lead, and that leads
Right.
to almost too much ownership or too little ownership. So even clarity there of as a coach saying, hey, these three things, here's really where I want you guys to lead and grow and take over the program.
Yeah, it makes me think of our basketball team who had some success last year and in the last couple of years really. And talking to our coach, and talking about the different players, we had a lot of talented players that could just go and just perform. And we also had some other really good players that were just good leaders on the team. There's one in particular, one we just had graduate. He's going to be a big loss next year. Not having him, just remember him on the court, almost like knowing what play was going to be called before the coach called it, kind of just being on that same plane as the coach, knowing kind of what the coach is wanting to do and executing that. Those players, even if they might not score the most points, they're very valuable to a team. And it goes back to this, his dad was a coach, so obviously he knows a little bit about coaching and different things, kind of knows what coaches expect. But just having that variety of players, it's not you're not going to be able to get 10 players that are just going to go score 30 points every night. But having those players that can organize the team, do all those things, goes back to peer leadership. And a lot of that is just communication, like you mentioned, making sure the coaches are clear in what they want each player to do. They know their job, they know what they're going to do, and they go and execute that. And I think that's one of the reasons we were able to have such good success the last couple of years. Finding players like that have those variety of skills that you can utilize, I think is very important.
Let's not fool ourselves where it takes talent. But
right.
You got to have players. That makes a good coach. But it sounds like something your coach has done really well is created clarity of roles. And here's what's expected to you. And it's like talent and really creating clarity and managing those personalities.
Yeah. Last thing I usually have our guests do is just give us any other information that you want to share that maybe we didn't get to. And also, I want you to share with our listeners the ways that they can find, I know you can find your podcast on Spotify. If there's any website or anything for the Impactful Coaching Project, they can get some more information about that. I'll also try to include that in the show notes as well. Anything else you'd like to share about the Impactful Coaching Project, kind of the goal of that, and maybe where they can find more information about that?
Yeah, so you can, we put out something once a week, sometimes twice a week through our Substack. So impactfulcoachingproject.substack.com. And there's a link to all the different ways you can access our podcast through there, but you can get it on Apple, Spotify, any of those things. And we also have 2 books right now. One is Leading and Coaching the 21st Century Athlete. We really enjoy the Gen Z kid. So talking about how to work with that kid. We spend a lot of time, and then we provide a lot of structure, a lot of stuff we talked about today, just a book we would have wanted to read when we got into coaching. Then we have a second one called Athletic Department Leadership, where we're in developing coaches, where we talk about how to put this in play at the athletic director level and create systems to create a holistic environment where kids are growing in every area. And that's, if I was to create a parting kind of comments, it would be all this stuff we talk about from a holistic perspective and this communication, everything we've talked about today. Not only is it the right way to treat people, in my opinion, with this generation of kid, I think it's also how you win. And even if you hate kids, and I hope you get out of coaching if that's the case, but even if you do, putting this stuff in play will give you more of a competitive advantage long term. You may be able to get a short term 1-year type thing, but when you look over the 5 or 10 year, I just am so convicted that this is not only the right way to treat people, but also how you win at a high level.
Yeah. Well, I'd encourage all our listeners to check out those resources. I really enjoy the podcast. I like that it's practical. It's not just some philosophical things. There's a lot of different things you talk about that are very practical for coaches, as well as anyone that works in athletic departments and really any organization. A lot of these same skills and things that are discussed can really apply there. And Rob, you forgot to mention the other resource, your dissertation. People can find that online, I'm sure, somewhere. The Peculiar Institution, which I'm probably going to check out, at least read some of it. So there's also some great information. There's probably some journal articles out there stemming from that. So make sure you all check out that as well. Rob, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been fun. I enjoyed it. A lot of great information to share. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right, that'll wrap things up for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. Special thanks again to Dr. Rob Ramseyer for being my guest this week. Be sure to listen to this episode and future episodes on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also catch the Playing with a Purpose podcast on the Freed Hardeman Athletics Champions of Character website at gofhulions.com/champions of character and on the NAIA Champions of Character website at naia.org/champions of character. Join me for our next episode as I talk with Freed Hardeman head women's basketball coach, Miss Abby Stutz, on the topic of what makes a great team captain. And remember, winning isn't just about the scoreboard, it's about the character we build along the way. We'll see you next time on the Playing with a Purpose podcast.